On March 26, 2026, a ship paid a toll to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. That happens every day. Ships pay fees, nothing unusual, except this toll was not paid in dollars. It was paid in Yuan, and the nation that built the system to collect that payment was not China. It was Washington. Washington did not intend to fund the Petrodollar inception. Every sanction it imposed on a sovereign energy producer forced that producer to build a payment system outside the dollar. Every asset it froze taught every other central bank on earth that dollar reserves were a liability, not a safety net. To understand what Washington destroyed, you need to understand what it built. In 1974, Henry Kissinger made a deal with Saudi Arabia, simple in structure, extraordinary in consequence. Saudi Arabia would price its oil exclusively in US dollars. In return, America would provide military protection and weapons. Every nation on Earth that needed oil, meaning every industrialized economy on Earth, would first need to acquire dollars. The dollar became not just a currency, but a toll booth, a structural tax on global commerce, collected invisibly every single day. The beauty of the system was its self-reinforcing logic. Nations bought oil in dollars. Oil exporters recycled those dollars into US Treasury bonds. America borrowed cheaply because the world absorbed its debt. Cheap borrowing funded the military that guaranteed the security that kept the oil flowing in dollars. A perfect loop. 50 years of structural advantage built on a handshake in Riyadh. That loop is now breaking. Not because it was challenged from the outside, but because Washington broke it from the inside, one weapon deployment at a time. The funding began in 2014. Washington sanctioned Russia following Crimea. Moscow's response was not to capitulate, it was to build. Russia's central bank began liquidating dollar reserves immediately, converting them into gold, an asset that cannot be frozen, seized, or sanctioned by executive order. That conversion continued for a decade. By 2025, gold comprised approximately half of Russia's accessible reserves. Washington funded every gram of it by making dollars unsafe to hold. 2018. Washington reimposed maximum pressure sanctions on Iran, cut it off from SWIFT, targeted its oil industry, applied the full force of dollar weaponization against a nation that exported nearly 2 million barrels of crude per day. Iran's response was not economic collapse, it was infrastructure construction. Over 8 years, Iran assembled a shadow fleet, hundreds of aging tankers operating under non-Western insurance, non-Western flags, and legal structures invisible to American oversight. When the Hormuz crisis began on February the 28th, 2026, that fleet was ready. Iran was exporting over 1 million barrels per day through the very strait it had officially closed to Western shipping. Washington funded the construction of that fleet. 8 years of maximum pressure, paid for every vessel. But the single largest grant Washington ever made to the Petrodollar project came in February 2022. When Russia invaded Ukraine, Washington and its allies froze $300 billion in Russian sovereign reserves. $300 billion held in Western financial institutions. Gone overnight. That decision was intended to cripple Russia. What it actually did was send a message to every central bank on Earth, including the ones in allied nations, that no dollar reserve was safe, that the rules of the system could be rewritten at will by the nation that controlled it. The response was immediate and structural. Central bank gold purchases exceeded 1,000 tons annually for 3 consecutive years. China's CIPS network accelerated its expansion to 189 countries. Project it.Bridge moved from testing to live transactions. In November 2025, the UAE Ministry of Finance settled a real government payment through it.Bridge using the digital dirham. Settlement time under 2 minutes. No SWIFT, no correspondent banks, no dollars. The $300 billion freeze was the single most effective marketing campaign in the history of alternative settlement systems. Washington did not just fund the infrastructure, it assembled the coalition. Saudi Arabia. In September 2025, the kingdom formalized a strategic defense agreement with Pakistan, replacing the American nuclear guarantee that had underpinned the original 1974 Petrodollar arrangement. The security pillar of the Petrodollar system was not abandoned, it was substituted. Washington's instability as a security partner drove every one of those decisions. India. Washington imposed a 50% tariff on Indian imports in August 2025, explicitly linking it to India's purchase of Russian crude. Its closest democratic partner in Asia was told that dollar compliance was a condition of the relationship. India's response was to settle Russian oil purchases in Yuan through October 2025, negotiate a deal to halt those purchases in February 2026, and confirm it will host the 2026 BRICS summit regardless. Washington did not secure India's loyalty. It demonstrated the precise cost of dollar dependency, and India calculated the exit price. China. While Washington sanctioned its adversaries, China became the buyer of last resort. It purchased sanctioned Iranian, Russian, and Venezuelan crude at below-market prices. By early 2026, a US congressional committee confirmed China had accumulated a strategic petroleum reserve of approximately 1.2 billion barrels. Bought at discount from the barrels Washington's sanctions were designed to strand. China built CIPS, it built it.Bridge, it built the Yuan swapline network across 40-plus countries. It did not fire a weapon or impose a sanction. It arrived with a checkbook every time Washington arrived with a blacklist. The European Union, 18 successive sanctions packages against Russia, and 7.2 billion euros spent on Russian LNG in 2025 alone, a record. France, whose president called remaining Russian imports very marginal, accounted for 42% of that total. The EU did not defend the rules-based order. It free-rode on American enforcement while quietly protecting its own energy interests. It talked like Washington. It bought like Moscow. Here is what this all means if the evidence holds. The Petro-Yuan inception is not a future event. It is a present one. On March 26, 2026, Yuan was accepted as payment for physical passage through the world's most critical energy choke point. That transaction, however small, however isolated, established a precedent that cannot be unsealed. The dollar is not dying. That is not the argument. The dollar will remain the dominant reserve currency for years, possibly decades. But dominance and monopoly are different things. What is ending is the monopoly, the structural condition in which there was simply no functional alternative to dollar settlement for global energy trade. That condition no longer exists. The alternative has been built, funded, and, at Hormuz, used. For the citizen, not the investor, the citizen, the question is not whether the petrodollar survives. It probably will in diminished form. The question is whether the people responsible for accelerating its decline will ever be asked to account for the mechanism by which they did it. Every sanction, every freeze, every tariff, every threat. Washington aimed the weapon. The target built a better system, and the citizens of the nation holding the weapon will pay the cost in higher borrowing rates, rising debt servicing, and the slow erosion of the fiscal latitude that 50 years of petrodollar privilege quietly provided. The Strait of Hormuz is 34 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. For 50 years, the petrodollar was the invisible toll booth through which the entire world passed. In March 2026, that toll booth changed hands. Washington built the replacement, one sanction at a time.